For the last several weeks, we have been in a series on courage, exploring the various facets of bravery. We've explored the courage to go, what it looks like to be courageous in staying, and now we will focus on another overlooked form of courage, the courage it takes to start something new. Here is the thing about beginnings. Most of them don't even look dramatic or like anything you would see on TV, but they all require immense amounts of courage. When I think about my own experience with starting something new, I think about my application to Denver Seminary and my interview with the dean in the Master of Divinity program. I think about my first interview with the District Committee of Ordained Ministry and the process of becoming a Methodist pastor. Beginnings might seem ordinary, but they require immense bravery because they're the spark that makes transformation possible. What might feel like a simple form or application to fill out, another meeting we put on the calendar, or a yes to something we've been asked to do, those small starts have the power to change the trajectory of our entire life. Every beginning, no matter how small, is a step in God's unfolding story of transformation. In her book, How We Learn to Be Brave, Bishop Mariann Edgar Budde reminds us that beginnings are universal and inherently courageous. Starting something means stepping into uncertainty, trusting our values, and putting one foot in front of the other, even though we don't know how things will work out. And the courage to begin is contagious. Our small step can inspire others to start something of their own. In her book, Bishop Budde writes, "When we decide to start towards something that requires courage, we are often creating new possibilities for those who come after us. Our example might be the one to inspire others. In deciding to start, we put ourselves on the path of transformation." That is exactly what we see in the story of Nehemiah that Bryn read for us today. God placed a dream to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem on Nehemiah's heart. And Nehemiah pursued that dream with great courage. Even though the risks were great, the cost was high, and the ruins of the past were all around, Nehemiah dared to start something new. But to fully appreciate Nehemiah's courage, we need to first understand the story behind the story. So in 587 BC, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, as we talked about last week, tore down the walls of the city, burned the gates, destroyed the temple, and carried away the people of Israel into exile. We spoke about the courage to stay and how the Jewish people were tasked with being faithful in Babylonian exile. Decades later, things changed again. Persia conquered Babylon, and the Persian kings Cyrus and Darius allowed the Jewish people to return home. Little by little, groups of Israelites made the long journey back to Jerusalem. But what they found was nothing but rubble and ruins. Over the next 70 years, leaders emerged to try and rebuild the city. A man who was the governor of Judah, Zerubbabel, led the Israelite people in the reconstruction of the temple. Now, this was monumental for the community because it gave the Jewish people a center for worship again, and it reminded them that God was with them even in all of the heartache and loss. Later on, a priest named Ezra called the people back to covenant faithfulness and invited them to start living their lives in obedience to God, Yahweh, and the law. So with the temple restored and the Torah proclaimed, there was progress. But the city of Jerusalem remained vulnerable because it still had no walls. No walls surrounding a city meant no protection from surrounding enemies. There was an attempt to rebuild the walls at one point, and we read about that in the book of Ezra, but that ended in failure. They didn't accomplish the goal. So the rubble of the walls stirred up a lot of shame and disgrace for the people of Israel. And this is where Nehemiah comes in. Nehemiah was not a governor or a priest or a prophet. He had no political power of any kind. Nehemiah was the Persian king's cupbearer in court. His job was to taste the king's wine to make sure it wasn't poisoned. And if he fell over, well, then the king wouldn't drink it, right? Which meant he was a very trusted servant, but he was still just that, an ordinary servant in court. When Nehemiah's brother, Hanani, returned from Judah and told Nehemiah, the walls of Jerusalem are broken down, the gates are destroyed by fire, Nehemiah sits down and weeps. He fasts and prays because of the failure that the people experienced from trying to rebuild the walls. So he confessed the sins of his people and begs God for provision. Before he does anything else, he goes to God in prayer, in humility and holy surrender. Now, this is a holy reminder, I think, for us that when we are discerning the decision to start, we need to go to God first in prayer, asking for wisdom and guidance. After this time with God, Nehemiah goes to the throne room to serve King Artaxerxes, the king at the time. And Artaxerxes notices that Nehemiah looks sad. Do you know those people that really can't hide their emotions, right? I do that. You know exactly how I'm feeling by my face. It's the worst. Now, this was dangerous because servants in Persian court were never allowed to look unhappy. Sadness could be interpreted as being disloyal or rebellious to the king. And while Nehemiah was terrified that King Artaxerxes called him out, he could not hide his grief. So the king says, Nehemiah, what's going on? Why are you so sad? Are you sick? And Nehemiah answers him, please send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild the walls. And this is where I want us to pause and look at this painting of Artaxerxes by Walter Crane. It shows the lavish court that Artaxerxes had, with the peacock feathers and the gold and the power. Can you imagine Nehemiah standing before this king with such power and authority? A lowly servant, just one of many, whose ability to kill Nehemiah was very much in the hanging. This image helps me feel the weight of this courageous moment. Nehemiah wasn't in a casual conversation with a friend. He was in the throne room of one of the most wealthy and powerful men in the world at that time. And yet, Nehemiah gathers all the courage he has and pleads with him. Says, please send me back to the city of my ancestors so that I can rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. This prayerful, fearful, trembling moment was Nehemiah's courage to start. And the thing is, the king could have punished him or killed him. He could do whatever he wants. He could have laughed him out of court, but instead, God was with Nehemiah. King Artaxerxes not only granted his request, He also provided letters of passage to make the very long journey to Jerusalem, sent him army officers and a cavalry to protect him, and gave him all of the supplies and resources needed to rebuild the wall. God's gracious hand was upon him and gave Artaxerxes the wisdom and discernment to say, "Go, rebuild." So Nehemiah and his team traveled to Jerusalem, and when they arrived, they didn't begin right away, but Nehemiah went out that night to inspect the ruins of the walls. He looked at the broken gates, the crumbled stones, and the heaps of rubble. And then, at that time, he gathered the people around and shared his vision to start. He said, "You see the trouble we are in. Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem so we will no longer be filled with disgrace." And the people respond, "Let us start rebuilding." But in the midst of this beginning, opposition comes. As Bryn read for us, men named Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem from neighboring areas mocked Nehemiah and his team, ridiculed them, and later even threatened them with violence. This is another reminder of what happens when we start something new. Resistance rises up, old patterns push back, and fear whispers. Yet Nehemiah and his team press on, and in just 52 days, they successfully complete the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. It's pretty amazing to think that after about 143 years, the city's walls lay in ruins, and it takes Nehemiah and his team less than 2 months to rebuild. Incredible things can happen when we rely on the Lord for strength and summon the courage to start. One of the difficult truths in starting something new, though, is that there is no guarantee in success. Our story might not end up like the story of Nehemiah, where everything is completed. As I said, there had been previous attempts to rebuild the wall that ended in horrific failure. And that is why I think the deepest kind of courage to start is when we start again after we have experienced failure and heartache. I know this personally because for years, Russ and I have held on to the dream of becoming parents. We've suffered tremendous heartbreak year after year after year, walked through infertility treatments, failed pregnancies, and said goodbye to babies that we have longed for. And it would be really easy for us to stop trying, to protect ourselves from more heartache, more failure, more pain. But God is with us. And God reminds us each and every day that we will be the best parents to a child that needs good parents. So we are starting a new chapter. Many of you know we have begun the journey of adoption. So Russ and I are in the midst of our home study filled with copious amounts of paperwork, opening our lives to scrutiny from strangers and saying yes to the uncertain, winding road. Of course, there are no guarantees in this process. Adoption is full of risk, just like everything else in this broken world. There can be disruptions, disappointments, and long seasons of waiting. But Russ and I are choosing to start anyway, because we have the aching in our hearts to be parents, and we believe that following that dream is worth the risk. When I think about what it means for me to be courageous in this season of my life, I think about how it has absolutely nothing to do with any assurance of success, because that doesn't exist. But instead, it is just the willingness to step towards love and hope and possibility. In her book, Bishop Budde says, in deciding to start, we put ourselves on the path of transformation And that, church family, is the guarantee. It is not guaranteed that we will have success when we start something new. But what is guaranteed is that if we continue to be faithful and present and pushing in to what God has for us, transformation will happen. And I know we are not the only ones that are in the midst of a new, brave beginning. Every person here has had the courage to start something new. Some of you know what it is like to start the road to sobriety by walking into a recovery meeting for the very first time. You might have gone terrified and unsure at first, but you went anyway. And in that meeting, your healing began. Some of you know the courage of starting a new career path and going back to school much later in life. You have faced opposition and doubt and worked hard to follow your dream, regardless of what age you started chasing that dream. A reminder, Moses, Abraham, Sarah, they were all old. God used them anyway. Some of you know the courage of starting a new chapter of life after losing a loved one. In the midst of your grief and loss, you formed new routines, new cherished memories, and continue to thank God for another day, even when you miss your loved one more than anything. Some of you know the courage of starting again in relationships, of choosing to forgive, even when it is the last thing you want to do, of opening your heart back up, even after it has been hurt far too many times, and choosing to love again. All of these things require profound courage and immense risk. But there is so much potential in each and every one of them. In every beginning, God is with us, giving us exactly what we need for the transformative journey we're on. Now, beginnings don't promise easy endings, and there are lots of setbacks and lots of disappointments. It is easy to get exhausted, but one of the things I think starting something new gives us is perseverance, trust, and a deep dependence on God. And what a gift all those things are. Starting a ministry is brave because it requires deep commitment and faithfulness over the long haul. Starting sobriety is brave because it requires daily decisions to resist our addiction. Starting a new job is brave because it requires vulnerability and the willingness to start something new. There are no shortcuts to this process, but every step builds until the vision we have becomes a reality. Nehemiah had an ache within him to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, so he started. Even though people made fun of him, mocked him, and even threatened him with violence, he pursued his dream with everything he had. And this morning, I wonder, what is God inviting you to start in this new season with September and fall and all things new? What has God put on your heart to begin? Maybe it is a new ministry that needs your specific hands and heart, a way that we, the people of Heart of Longmont, are able to partner with existing ministries, something within the church, like ushering or helping with children's ministry, or continuing to serve on a particular team, like mission or ministry design. Maybe it's a justice issue where you are being called to stand up and say, come, let us rebuild. And other people will be inspired by your passion and share in your vision and join you in that. Whatever it is you are being called to start, remember that you're not starting alone. The same gracious hand that was upon Nehemiah is upon each one of you. giving you everything you need for the journey. And so as we start a new week, may you carry this blessing with you. May each step you take be guided by God's wisdom, abundance, and strength. May the broken places in your life be continued to heal by Christ's love. And may you, beloved, do the sacred work of breathing new life into this church, into your families, and into the wider community. Thanks be to the God who turns rubble into renewal, ruins into restoration, and our lives into vessels of grace. Amen.